I am as Western as you can get, at least originally. My last name is even West, and I was born in Vancouver, as far west as you can possibly get. You may notice that my clothing is a little Asian in appearance, because I am a Buddhist monk, and I have been a Buddhist monk for 31 years now. And somehow Asia, the religions of Asia, the art of Asia, the philosophy of Asia, even the architecture of Asia, has invaded my being. And I am primarily influenced by Asia in the West. So I have brought Buddhism back to the West. The structure of my religious beliefs is from India originally, and I was trained in Thailand, and so saturated with Thai culture as well. I spent some years at the International Forest Monastery in Thailand. Now this is west going east. The disciples at the International Forest Monastery, Wat Pa Nanachat, are from every Western country: Germany, Italy, North America, Canada, Australia, etc. And then they picked up these training structures and have diversified back to the West. So we have 36 Asian Western monasteries around the world, most of them in the West. So this is an incredible saturation. I have started a monastery as well, and if you look around the monastery, you will see Asian influences in everything: the art, the Buddha images, the landscaping, the interior design, exterior designs. You may also see the lifestyle of monks. We are the original tiny house people. These little cottages that monks live in are called kutis, and they're dotted throughout the monasteries of Asia and also the monasteries of the West. And in some ways you see that this tiny house idea is also taking off in the West. So many ideas. In my personal life, if I can trace it in this life, the influences begin at a visit to Japan when I'm 15 years old on a school trip. I'm taken to a Zen garden in a famous Japanese monastery called Ryonji. And out from the back comes a Japanese Buddhist monk who talks to us in English and makes a great connection. Somehow he has the mischievous connection with 15-year-olds in a strange country. He talks to us in some way unlike our teachers. That makes a great impression on me. After a while, in my 20s, I encounter meditation. After a long search in the West, a fruitless search in Western philosophy, I encounter meditation. And that is a different use of the mind. I encounter a Tibetan monk in Toronto. I spend about a year studying with him. He has a different perspective on reality. It changes me. Eventually, I make my way to a Korean Zen monastery in Toronto. And there I actually enter after some time of practice, and I am influenced again by the attitudes of Buddhism, but also the different structures of the mind, a different way to use the mind. After that, I went off and became a hermit. Again, the hermit idea from Asia. Is it possible to live alone in the woods in a minimalist style without being merely an eccentric or a criminal? Is it possible to be a wise and peaceful person living alone in the forest? I only encountered this in an episode in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. On a visit to New York, I entered the main building, and a large art gallery was a Chinese hermit's cottage from the 12th century, given by China to Richard Nixon, the President of the United States. The strange encounter with this influenced my way of thinking that I also would like to live this way. So I did. After my time as a lay hermit, I realized I would become a monk. And I proceeded to ordain at the first forest monastery in North America, near West Virginia, close to Washington, D.C. My ordination was actually filmed and photographed by the museum in Washington, D.C., and became part of a display on Buddhism for a full year. In some ways, there's an interaction between the West and East, even in the heartland of the U.S. This is spreading all through the West in terms of meditation and mindfulness. You can't go anywhere without bumping into mindfulness practices. These derive also from Asia, from the Buddhist tradition. This combination of a psychological perspective, a philosophical perspective, art perspective, a design perspective, and a transformation of how people interact with each other are all embedded now in the West. Asia has thoroughly entered the West. Some of my early readings were of Thoreau. And strangely enough, Thoreau says in his book Walden that in the mornings he bathed in the Bhagavad Gita, a famous text from India, a so-called Hindu text but deeply influenced by Buddhism. Thoreau in the 1840s bathing in the Bhagavad Gita and living as a hermit. This influenced me. I also explored the Bhagavad Gita. So we see the Asia coming to the West in philosophy very early and pervading a whole generation's thinking, because Thoreau became a hero of the 60s generation, the return to the land, to turn on, tune in, and drop out. This really is an emulation of Thoreau's ideas as well, mixed with modern pharmaceuticals like LSD. So there is an interaction between the use of drugs as an attempt to get a brief access to some sort of enlightened view of things. But this enlightened view is not the Western enlightened view, it's the Asian enlightened view. All of the pilgrimages that the hippies made to India and Asia as well. Constant flow and interaction and renewal of change through the imbibing of the Asian philosophy, Asian ways of being. So the influences of Asia are pervasive, inescapable. One may not even be conscious of it, but one is saturated with it. At least in my case, I am conscious of it.